Comedian Joe Bono, known to many as Charabank's James Bondine, has died following a battle with ALS. A poignant and touching tribute to murdered Lassana has been unveiled in a Gotland church, and Charming Gauci says that Malta's restrictions on home gatherings are being reviewed ahead of the Christmas period. All this and more on Lovin Daily. Good evening, Malta and Gozo, and welcome to another episode of Lovin Daily. My name is Yannick, and with me is Diacono. We're going to be running you through today's top stories, starting with the first one about the tragic passing of comedian Joe Bono. Tim, have the story for us?
Yes, sad news. Joe Bono, well-known actor in the Maltese scene, particularly known for his portrayal of James Bondine on Charabank. He was the person who had a famous altercation with Dom Mintoff once. He sadly passed away after a very long and public battle with ALS, the neurodegenerative disease. His wife, Tanya De Bono, shared a very heartfelt memory of him, and the fact that he was, unfortunately, was suffering until the very end. We've spoken to him. He was, if you know about ALS, it's gradual, so it gets progressively worse, and Joe knew it, and the sad thing was he was when you see a man who takes who's a very funny person, and then seeing him reduced by this very painful illness, it was very sad to see, but it also really, I think, acted as maybe a wake-up call, but like a bit of a reality check that this can happen to anyone, right? So yeah. This is when you see someone you know and someone you love and suffering as well, it brings it home, right? As in,
yeah, it does.
This could happen to anyone.
And especially the nature of the illness, that you kind of every day you lose more ability, I think is very harsh. I mean, and for all of us who obviously grew up occasionally watching Charabank, he is a recognizable figure. And as you said, I mean, his campaigning and the way he's chosen to confront the illness was commendable and probably helped a lot of people struggling with similar conditions. On to our next story, a beautiful painting in tribute to a man who was murdered in cold blood because of the color of his skin has been unveiled in a Gotland church. So as many of you will remember, Lassana, 42-year-old father of three, was gunned down in a Halfar road by two off-duty AFM soldiers as he walked home after watching And we're back. Sorry about that. We've had some technical difficulties. Sabiħ live, as they say. So we're discussing our second story, which is about a beautiful painting in tribute to Lassana, which has been unveiled in a Godsden church. As many of you will remember, Lassana, 42-year-old father of three, was gunned down in a Halfar Road by two off-duty AFM soldiers as he walked home from watching a football match. The new painting placed on the inner side of the St. George's Basilica in Rabat Gozo shows Lassana with two figures by his side. One, which represents society, is depicted looking away from Lassana and towards a mobile phone, while the second figure, which is embracing him, represents the church offering solace to the poor. The painting is the work of Godsden artist Manuel Farrugia and is one of 8 paintings forming part of the Opri Tal-Ħniena series, intended to remind the public that they should never shy away from helping those vulnerable in a time of need. What will society do now? Keep scrolling as we do on our mobiles, or decide to care, parish priest Joseph Kurmi said of the painting. And so the painting has, as everything else in Malta, has received both praise and condemnation. Most people have praised the initiative, including Briccuni frontman Mario Vella, who in a Facebook post this morning described the work as possibly the most important piece of local art from the last decade. Do you agree?
Yes, I do agree. It's in terms... Well, if not the most important, definitely one of the most important. It's really, I think it struck a nerve, and it's an extremely powerful painting, and the fact that the church is actually placing it in one of its churches. I think it's also a really good sign, right, for the church moving forward. I mean, unfortunately, they're often, right or wrong, have this impression of being stuck, only thinking about the past or about life after death, without confronting the challenges that we face as a society today. There was a very interesting discussion on this on John Monlia's podcast with Mark Lawrence actually. I don't know if you saw it. But I think it's a really good example of how the church can be more relevant in using itself to confront these challenges. And this is a challenge of racism. Let's put it very bluntly. That's what it was. This man was walking home by himself after watching a football game, and two people, the suspects or soldiers, people meant to be protecting him, killed him, shot him down. He was no longer able to see his family, he couldn't sleep that night, that's it. They decided, your life means nothing to me.
It also reflects the changing demographic of Maltese society, I guess, that the church is saying, Malta is no longer this homogeneous place where everyone is the same, and I think it helps, it helps
Never
us
was
going
homogeneous.
Well, less so now, I suppose, than it was, say...
Yes, there's different cultures that are coming in, and it's also good to see the church giving him a place of permanence. This is what I saw, the fact it actually is there in the church itself. It's going to remain there. And great to see these initiatives. Some more good news. The Superintendent of Public Health, Charmaine Gauci, has announced that she's reviewing the restrictions on home gathering. So it is actually surprised me that these restrictions still existed. So it is still currently illegal to have more than 4 households in the same house. This is despite the fact that you can have 100 people, up to 100 people at a party, that everyone's in the roads without a mask, that you can attend anything, pretty much anything at the airport, no social distancing. But 5 households at a home is illegal. So the police can technically, they're not doing it because it looks like enforcement has stopped across the board, but they can technically come into your home and fine you if they find 5 households. So good that it's being reviewed. I don't know what's taking them so long. I think it should just be scrapped, right?
I guess, yes, in a sense, as you said, many of the rules, I guess, have stopped being enforced, and it's pretty much no longer in people's minds. We are approaching winter, and there is a bit of a resurgence across Europe, so I suspect maybe it might not be scrapped completely because of that. And to be fair to the authorities, I guess it's difficult.
When you have 100 people at a party.
Well, one can make the argument that you can ensure that in a party of 100 people, you can send an inspector to ensure that the distancing rules are being followed, whereas in someone's house it's
even
more
that
difficult
they're
to
changing
control.
it now as well.
I'm not, by no means am I saying it should remain.
And there's it doesn't seem to be much distancing going on at a lot of events either.
I think they should just be scrapped and then reintroduced when necessary. Anyway, On to our next story. The Civil Protection Department has warned residents of Malta against leaving their homes this evening unless absolutely necessary, as strong winds accompanied by gusty thundery showers approach Malta. So Malta, along with the rest of the central Mediterranean, has been experiencing a bout of very bad weather over the last couple of days, which has resulted in flooded streets and damage being caused across the island. While the country has experienced near constant rain over the past days, it has been largely spared the fate of Sicily and Tunisia, for example, which both experienced very intense storms yesterday. The Civil Protection Department, in a post this afternoon, advised the public to avoid roads known to flood, while also, as we said, advising drivers to avoid any unnecessary trips. It stressed that it was prepared for any eventuality, but obviously it was better to avoid problems. The Met Office has also issued a warning of its own, upgrading its weather warning from yellow to orange, as it said that an east-northeastern wind was expected to hit the islands. Winds are expected to reach force 7 and last until 9 p.m. this evening. The Met Office also said there was a high possibility of rain and thunder, as well as possibly hail accompanying the storm. I guess it's we're definitely not going through a drought this end of.
Spare a thought for the Tri Repubblica protesters.
Yeah, definitely.
Who are out in front of the depot and who are camping outside the depot for the next
Worst possible night.
Yeah, the worst.
But I suppose that's to happen.
But I think it also makes it even more powerful, you know. So it's
right.
They're basically camping outside until Friday, calling in front of the depot in Floriana, calling for the immediate arrest and prosecution of Conrad Mizzi. Yeah, like you said, it's not the ideal timing, seeing as the weather is what it is, but it also puts into perspective the fact that if they manage to brave the storm and stayed and continue their protest, it's a sign of like how much they believe in the message.
It's a very strong message. Yeah.
Yes, and to even make the message stronger. And there is also a protest happening on Friday and at half 6, but not in the depot in front of Castile this time, as though the Prime Minister can arrest Conrad Mizzi.
But I mean, I guess it's more the symbolic nature of it,
yeah.
and to keep it on the agenda.
Yes.
Which they're right to do.
Yeah, for sure, because these are things that sometimes they you speak about them, and then they get there's some movement, yeah. But then everything just dies, and the police do nothing. Unfortunately, sometimes they have a point in that public pressure sometimes is the only way to get things moving. It shouldn't be the case. I find it very disturbing as in society, but that's the way it is. And this actually brings us to our last story. Former PN leader Adrian Delia has turned up the ante on the infamous steward deal, the sale of 3 hospitals. So basically, there was a new development, which is there's a legal battle going on between Stewart and one of the original investors who had invested in Vital Global Healthcare, which were before them. And a court in London ordered Stewart to pay him compensation. They're challenging the enforcement of that decision in Malta, saying that the Vitals deal was corrupt and fraudulent. Now, Adrian Delia is saying, like, this, which is Stewart themselves admitting it, this means that no money should go to Stewart in the budget. Therefore, like, Parliament is discussing the budget estimates at the moment. Therefore, any MPs who vote in favour of the budget will be breaking the law, because eventually, this is illegal money going to a corrupt deal. It's an interesting point. I mean, if we're, I think also made the point about banks processing it. So obviously, banks are under immense scrutiny because of the FATF at the moment, and he's saying if it's a corrupt deal, and is this money laundering, or you're betting in money laundering? I suppose he has a point. I think. I mean, I know there's the government involved, but it's considering all the rules that banks are being made to follow. I'd find it extremely ironic in the sense, and hypocritical as well, to if it's allowed to process millions of payments to a deal that's been found to be corrupt.
Yeah, no, it's as you say, it's a very interesting point that he's raised. As you say, like Delia's point was that anything agreed to in a contract which is deemed to be corrupt, obviously cannot be enforced, and that by voting in favor of transferring the funds to steward healthcare, then MPs are effectively breaking the law. Whether he's right in that their vote in Parliament amounts to a breach of the law remains to be seen. But I think that the point he's making is a valid one, and sort of one that should be taken note of, I suppose. Well, that's it from us for today. Thank you very much for following, and have an evening full of love.